Hello, this is Mike Van Meter. Welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. I want to thank you for joining me. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. Today, we're going to be talking about Recovery Dundee. Recovery Dundee is a recovery group in Dundee, Scotland. And today we're going to have a guest, and the guest is Sharon Webster, and she's going to be talking to us about the program over there. And, you know, I have developed a relationship with Sharon here over the past few weeks. After meeting, I had reached out to Recovery Dundee through their Facebook site, and Sharon responded back to me. We've had a relationship ever since then. And my interest in Scotland actually began a couple of years ago when I was in Brussels, Belgium on business, and I was talking to some Scottish police officers. And we got into a discussion about addiction after a night of not just these guys, but all the people we were with trying to get me to drink and me refusing to drink while we were over there. And they were kind of fascinated by, you know, why is it that I wouldn't drink at all? And I think that they were trying to figure it out. They were, you know, because I know a lot of times Europeans think that we Americans have, you know, are just very prudish about drinking and just very, you know, maybe it's for religious reasons or other reasons. But I ended up explaining to them, no, that I can't safely drink alcohol at all, and kind of explained what was going on with me. And that turned into a really big discussion about addiction and the problems that addiction creates. And they gave me the European perspective, particularly the Scottish perspective, regarding the issues that they face over there, and talk about the different philosophies and how addiction is handled in Europe as opposed to the United States. And it was a really good conversation. But what it did was it caused me to go back and take a look at Europe, because I will say that one of my faults, and I think the faults of a lot of Americans, is that we oftentimes think that the problems that we have are unique to where we are, and we only pay attention to where we are. And I think that a lot of countries do that. But that discussion forced me to kind of get out of my world and get out into the rest of the world and look at what the problems are there. And I started doing some research on Scotland and saw what issues are happening. I know heroin is a big issue. Pills are a big issue. Of course, all over Europe is a real drinking culture. And after I met Sharon and we had some discussions about it, really just kind of sucked me in and really got me wanting to learn more and more and wanting to help in any way I could with that. And so I asked Sharon to come on the show today, and she is here. And Sharon's going to share with us our story. This may be a several-part episode here, but Sharon's going to talk about who she is and why she does what she does and the type of work that she does now. So with that, Sharon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be on here and speak to you. I'm a bit nervous because I've never done a podcast like this before, but I'm happy to share the things we're doing over here and the problems that we face and the relationships we have with alcohol and drugs and how that affects the wider community.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, I hope you can understand my accent. Can you understand my accent?
Definitely. My stepmother's from New York, so I've got a good handle on it. Yes. So.
You know, I'm curious, right? Just before we get started here, obviously you're from Scotland. You have an accent. Do Scottish people think that we have an accent?
Definitely, yeah. I think listen to the Scottish accent on any television media or anything is very strange. It sounds quite terrible. The American accent always sounds pretty good, like I think, yeah. So I don't know. In my view, I think I understand the accent quite well. I think probably you'll have a great deal of difficulty understanding some of the words that I say.
No, and actually, I have to say the opposite is true for me. I actually hear the Scottish accent, and I think it sounds really cool. I really like it. In fact, okay. I find every time I talk to you, in my mind, I start thinking in a Scottish accent. It takes a couple of days for that to go away.
I like that. That's good. I like
so
that.
Sharon, tell us a little bit about yourself. What brings you here? How did we get here to this point?
So, I mean, like you said, you reached out to us in the Facebook page,
Yeah.
but getting to the point where I am in my life right now, obviously, like the very early stages of my life, I suffered a lot of trauma and a lot of displacement. I moved around the country a lot, and eventually came back to Dundee. In my teenage years, I grew up in London, so I was exposed to a kind of middle class background. My stepfather worked for BBC, so I was exposed to a lot of things that many people would never be exposed to as a teenager and a child. When I moved back to Dundee, I moved from a middle class living to living in quite severe poverty, and the whole city was like that. And I suppose that compounded the experience I'd had as a child, and it pushed me into using drugs, I think. So, yeah, I think my addiction lasted for about 10 years. I used heroin, obviously, on a daily basis. First off, it was to get rid of the feelings I had, and then it was like having to drink water or breathe air. You needed it to function. And when it got to that stage, I realised I had a big problem, and I reached out for help, and then quickly realised that in my country specifically, the treatment and the services that are on offer are probably 3 decades behind probably America and a good part of the rest of Europe as well. So I was a single mum at the time, and trying to find support that was good and specific for me was impossible. And my life moved forward so much whilst I was in treatment. I had to take control of the treatment that I was on, and I withdrew from methadone at home with 4 children. And when I reached out for support for recovery back then, and you're only talking now, I would say I stopped using heroin about 7 or 8 years ago, and then I came off methadone. Actually, 4 years would be on the 24th of August. There was nothing except for the fellowship, 12 steps, and although that is great, and I know many decades it's helped a lot of people get into recovery, it was impossible for me to access the meetings and things like that because of the times that they were set and where they were set and the distance we had to travel to get to these. So I seen a huge gap, and I knew I wasn't unique. So I spent a year volunteering with a charity called Add Action. They're a gateway service across the UK. So if you're suffering with any kind of addiction, you would go to the service, and they would funnel you into the National Health Service, and you would then get put for alcohol or drugs or whatever your addiction was, and they would put you in contact with the treatment or services that you need. So I volunteered with them for a year and sort of seen how they worked and what they had on offer, and seen there was a huge gap in what they did and how they supported people. So I used my experience from that, and I connected with a charity called the Scottish Recovery Consortium. They're very well known in Scotland, and they're kind of at the forefront of a lot of recovery stuff that goes on here. They were set up by government to then link in recovery communities that didn't exist back then. That was about 15 years ago. We joined up with them. I worked with them for about 9 months and got 2,000 people to our city to raise awareness, make recovery visible, and really show people that it was possible to recover by bringing people from all over the UK to our city, and showing that, because in Dundee, it's a very unique experience, recovery, for a lot. Like, there's not many people that are in recovery in Dundee, and those that are kind of stay in the shadows because of the stigma attached to especially drug addiction, especially alcohol. I think we've got a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol in Scotland. It's socially accepted, and you, like you said, when you had that experience with your colleagues when you were in Europe, it's frowned upon if you don't drink alcohol. Like, you're like the person that's got the issue because you're not engaging with alcohol. So once we worked with the SRC, we then started gaining momentum, and after the recovery walk, the SRC went away, and we still had a group, and we knew that people needed support, and we've kind of shaped over the last 3 years a kind of support that's more emotionally we're more emotionally available for people. We're more there at the times they need them and when it's needed. We intervention, there's online support, we do like social events, and it's taken a new direction over COVID because we've seen the effects of 3 generational of addicts in families, especially in we call housing schemes. So we're in collective housing schemes, which are areas where, I don't know what you call it in America, social housing maybe. Owned by
public
council
housing.
and government. Yeah. So there's probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 housing schemes in Dundee. And then you've got people that have lived in poverty when the mills and places that were given employment to a lot of families closed down in the 80s. Alcohol became a big issue. Then in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, drugs then became a big issue. And now you've got children who are related to grandparents, mothers, fathers, uncles who are 3 generations in to being addicted, and now they are using drugs and alcohol both at the same time. So they've got dual addictions from the ages, I would say the youngest person we supported is 13, and that is the direction we're going in now, and we're starting to work with young people. I spoke at Westminster, I think probably a year ago in May, and gave evidence to the Scottish Affairs Committee because drug-related deaths are so high in our country. Dundee has actually been the highest for many years. I think Glasgow superseded us last year, but only by a tiny percentage. And I think in relation to how many people live in each city, we're probably all even on that. But the drug-related deaths have been a big point of contention for government and council, and they've driven quite hard on trying to resolve this in the last 2 years. They're focusing on naloxone, which is drug reversal for overdose, harm reduction, which is great, and speaking to people with a lived experience to try and get a handle on what they could do, but also at the same time using lived experience for whatever they're trying to shape. It's not being shaped by the people that understand the issues. It's being shaped by the people that have got the funding and money to do that, and then used for whatever they decide. Yeah. So we spoke and we told them that out of 4 people that gave evidence, I was the only person that raised the issue about young people. And to me, if you're wanting to stop a problem or an issue, you go to the root of the problem. And these children now and teenagers and young people, so I'm talking from the age of, say, 13, 14 to 24, they are the next drug deaths or drug-related deaths, alcohol-related deaths in the future. And without intervention and early education, this is just going to continue, and the drug deaths will continue to rise. So for us, our direction now is to focus on the kids that are affected by that. For me, my partner committed suicide just as I was starting to try and get better, and that affected my children on a whole other level.
My God.
Obviously, my addiction obviously affected them quite badly. I've got 4 kids. My oldest son's 22. My youngest is 7. He's had the best of me, which you can see the big difference between my older children and him, like immensely. So I can understand these issues fundamentally because I'm affected directly and can see the impact that a drug-related death or a suicide can have. Like, we also have the highest rate of male suicide in Scotland. So it's there's a whole, the issues are very complex and hard to understand, but to me, fundamentally, to get to the root of the issues that we're trying to deal with, we can only do that if we are engaging with the young people and the people that are the future of our city and country. And yeah, it's I don't know, it's a no-brainer for me, and the fact that they still haven't got anything in place for these kids. They've suffered like trauma through addiction, through parents and grandparents. They've suffered trauma through bereavement of drug-related deaths. Then you've got the added pressure of peers and what's going on in the community as a whole. So yeah, it's I don't know if I've gone off topic a bit there, but to understand the direction that we've moved from in the last 4 years, we focused on the people that were trying to get into recovery, the people that are getting better. We've got a big group of people now who are in recovery, people that are back to work, living their lives as they should. And we've got a core group of people who are trying to then I don't know, identify the issues that have caused them to get to that point, and then help others not to get to that point. And we've got young people in the group who have never touched drugs. They've maybe had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, which is changing. So we know that the things that we're doing to help them are working, and we want to then create that so we can do that on a larger scale. And then that's where we're at just now. And yeah, I think the health issues relating to, I mean, I was absent for a whole year of my youngest son's life because of the health issues I had after coming off methadone. There's no disclosure on the effects methadone has on people when you're prescribed it. There's no disclosure on the effects it will have later on to your health, your lungs, your immune system, things like that. I almost died in the first 2 years of my recovery. I spent most of that fighting for my life. And
Oh my God.
although I was fighting for my life anyway, yeah, I had a DVT after I had my youngest son, which was left. And the stigma attached to being a drug user, you understand when you go to a health professional with any sort of pain or illness, they automatically think that you're drug seeking or you're trying to gain something from them. So you do not get the service that you need. You do not get the compassion or the empathy, especially if you've got a serious health condition. I was left for 6 months with a blood clot in my leg after having a cesarean, and almost died because of that, and spent 2 months in hospital, almost had my leg amputated, and I missed the first year of my son's life. I couldn't walk for a year. I was on crutches for a year after that. And the fact that I'm still here is a miracle, I would say. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a surreal. I think that falling into the work that I'm doing just now, I say it's happened by accident. Like, I never ever planned to go out and be an activist and planned to go out and support people. It's just evolved that way, and it's worked really well. We've brought media here. We've got we've worked with people from all over the world. In fact, doing interviews and stuff. Like, just before I had done this podcast with you, we had a guy come from France to do just a small piece of media. So it's and to say that we've worked for 4 years with no funding, Mike, none at all. So everything we've achieved in the last 4 years, we had no funding, and we've done it as a community-based activists and our own time and knowledge. So yeah, it's a bit surreal considering people know us everywhere. It's yeah.
Well, yeah, I think sometimes that's the best way to do it. I think that well, you know, there's a lot there, and I tell you, those that are familiar with recovery know that the format for like telling the story is the way that it was, what happened, the way it is now. And but before we move on to the other, you know, what happened to you and how you got here, and then in the work that you're doing right now, if you don't mind, let me just kind of follow up on some of the things that you just talked about, because for the Americans that are listening to this podcast, very different systems. So this is a very complex issue for us and for us to understand, and that's why I kind of want to peel this apart a little bit, because you're related. Like, you talk about the National Health Service, and you talk about the government giving you medications and things like that. It's a bit different here. The relationship that we have with our government and the relationship that we have with our medical service is very different here in the United States. However, there are some similarities, but it's not because it's mandated by the government. I think it's just a difference of opinion in how addiction works, what addiction is, and how it should be treated. And that becomes, anybody that's been in the addiction business for any length of time, like, you and I, Sharon, is it can become very controversial, and it's a heavy and sometimes emotional debate, right? Because what you had mentioned, because let me make sure I understand this. So in Scotland, or in the UK in general, my understanding of what you're saying is that if you have an addiction, no matter what that addiction is, it could be alcohol, it could be cocaine, it could be heroin, the treatment is methadone. That's correct? That's how it's treated?
Well, yeah.
It's
Not
like
alcohol,
that's like the
not
cure-all
alcohol.
drug in Europe.
Yeah.
That's what it, or at least the UK. I should say the UK,
Well,
right?
I would say for Dundee specifically, I know it happens
Okay.
across Scotland, but as far as our treatment service in the city that I'm in, for the last 30 years, methadone has been the go-to drug for drug addiction, not alcohol, just drug addiction.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
changed slightly over the last 4 years. There's other options. There's the use of a drug called Suboxone now. It's probably called something else in America, so that people have a different choice, but they're opiate based, and that's for cocaine addiction,
Yeah.
heroin, for any drug that somebody goes to the drug service, even for Valium, they will put you on an opiate-based or
Suboxone, and then there's another one called
opiate-based.
naltrexone, and those are
Yeah.
those are known as opiate uptake inhibitors. And
Yes. Yeah.
so for folk, and I'm actually, I'll be honest here, I'm actually very familiar with that because here in the U.S., naltrexone is used for opiate addiction, but it is also used for alcohol addiction. And so for those that are listening that don't know what these drugs are, and this is a very poor explanation of how it works. But like I said, it's known as an opiate uptake inhibitor. And in layman's terms, what that means is that it does not take away the effects of, let me just take alcohol, because it is used in the United States for alcohol. It doesn't take away the effect of alcohol. It reduces the effect of alcohol. Okay. And it is very commonly prescribed here in the United States. And there are people that swear by it. I'm not going to say there aren't people that have been helped with that. I'm not going to say that, but I am going to say that there's a big danger to it. And here's the danger. And I'm sure this applies over where you are, Sharon. Here's the danger. Because it does not eliminate craving and it does not eliminate the effect. The problem is, let's say, and it's very common, right? For people to relapse in early recovery. Most people, it's actually more common to relapse than not relapse. Okay. And, at least in the experience that I've had. So let's say that you relapse and you start drinking. Well, the effect isn't completely taken away. So you are getting some effect from the alcohol. And we know if you're alcoholic, that once you get that effect, then you want more and more and more. The problem is because you've been taking naltrexone, the effect that you're getting from what you're drinking isn't as much. So you drink more to compensate for that. So you end up drinking much more than you would have been doing had you not been taking naltrexone in the first place. And that is a very, very dangerous thing for people to do. And the same is true if you're taking heroin and you're on naltrexone. And that's been very problematic over here. And, so my personal opinion is there's another drug known as antabuse. And so if you drink on antabuse, you just get violently ill. It is a very harsh drug to take, but it won't kill you. Or at least there's very, very, very uncommon for you to die from it. Now you'll want to die because it's a very violent reaction if you drink on it. Now ask me how I know that. Ask me how I know that.
I don't,
because I've experienced it.
How do you know that, Mike?
Because I can tell you. What's that?
What a shame. They use anti-abuse here as well for alcohol.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with that. We've got people in the group, obviously, that have suffered with alcohol addiction. We're good friends. Scott, he had stage 4 liver failure, and he's been clean for over 1,000 days now.
Wow, good.
He was told he was going to die. Yeah. So he's doing amazing. But like you said, with the naltrexone, we've been trying to bring that to Scotland, not because we think it's better than any other treatment. It's just because it's another option for people. I think even with the opiate replacement like methadone and that, like you said, with the naltrexone, if you have to drink more to get the effect. We witness people on a daily basis using on top of methadone, like it's common culture. Like people use constantly on top of it. The methadone. I got slated quite a lot because of my views on methadone, and I'm not saying it doesn't work. What my issue with it here is it's not prescribed properly. It's not the people that are prescribed it aren't looked after the way they should. There's no other intervention except that. So there's no counselling, there's no other support. That is changing slowly, and things are starting to get better, but it's been quite dire, and people are just left. We've got people that have been on methadone prescriptions since they were 15, and they are now going into their 50s.
Wow.
So I'm not joking, yeah. So it's being highlighted online. We've done articles and documentaries with some specific people who have spoke out about that. So it's real contention for me that this drug can help people, and I know it can get people stable and do its job, but it's not done properly, and it's quite sad, actually.
And by the way, and let me clarify with this. And I don't mean that to sound like naltrexone does not help people, because, like I said earlier, there are people that it helps, and
definitely.
It's just. But I will tell, just like you had mentioned, that things aren't handled properly, and people don't tell. Like you were talking about methadone and how nobody explained to you like the health consequences. It's a good thing, but then there's health consequences, and I know. In my experience with naltrexone, the explanation I just gave, I gave that explanation through experience. Like I experienced that.
Yeah.
Nobody sat me down and said, "Hey, by the way, let me make sure you understand how naltrexone works, and how it doesn't work, and educate me on this." I mean, I found these things out the hard way. And that should not have been. Somebody should have explained to me. We hand out, even here in the U.S., we hand out drugs in treatment for addiction treatment, and with very little explanation. And I'll be honest with you, I think many of the people that hand the drugs out don't give the explanation because they don't understand themselves how this stuff works. And it's a very, very dangerous thing. Naltrexone, Suboxone, methadone, all of these different drugs are effective, and abuse, all of them. They're very effective, but you need to know what they're used for and what the consequences are if you misuse them. And we just don't do a good enough job with that. Not in my opinion.
No, I totally agree with you. It's been a contention of me for a long time that people do not get the right information when they're prescribed any of these medications, and the implications of long-term use, and the fact there's no proper intervention in between people being prescribed them and then they expecting them to come off them. The way I see it, the services here will get your addiction under control and get you stable by medication, and then they will expect you to come off that medication without addressing actually the root cause of the addiction in the first place, and how you got there. So it's quite scary. And now we've got kids and young people that are following suit with dual addictions to many, like some of them actually scare me because some of the drugs they're using and the age they're using, the bodies are still developing, and no intervention in school. There's no education in school. They'll have people go in and talk about drug use and the effects of them and what this could do and what that could do, but there's no real education on. And in 5 years or 10 years time, if you're using this and you've got these issues that fundamentally from your upbringing or through your life, you are primed to be addicted to something, and giving them the right information on where to go, how to get help. Like there's nothing like that. And I think that things have been left for so long, and to understand, we had the AIDS crisis in the 80s in Dundee, and also criminality. And I think methadone was brought in back then without the knowledge and the understanding of what that drug actually does to maintain people that were unwell with bloodborne viruses, and then also stop criminality and bring poorer communities to a certain degree of control, so that police, NHS and that didn't have so much pressure on them. And since that time, not much has changed. And yes, in the last 10 years, they've tried to address the problems, but they have people like in the government trying to address these problems, and they're so far removed from the real issues, they can't possibly understand the social issues that somebody in a housing scheme, working class area has compared to what they do, so that there's a disconnect there. And I think that's fundamentally where the problems arise, because they don't have the knowledge and understanding, and they're getting it secondhand from people who have got better, but they are not going to the root cause of what's going on. And poverty is a huge reason for why we're suffering the way we are in Scotland. I think it's a huge reason why many people end up suffering with mental health issues, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and suicide. So it's quite scary here at times, because you see people trying to address the issues, but nothing happens. We had a 16,000 page document written, I think, a year ago, probably nearly 18 months ago, about the services in Dundee, how to make things better. There was a 12-point plan on how to address them. That's moving forward, and I was a member of that commission, and we will reconvene in 18 months. But it's not enough. It's not enough. Like, I see the effects on a daily basis. I think because we're on the ground, we're grassroots, we see things a lot different to the people that are making decisions and writing policies and offering services to people like us and the people that we live with. So, yeah, it's a sad situation here at times, to be truthful.
Yeah, and you mentioned that these policies are being made by people that don't understand what's going on, and I think that's one of the problems in recovery, and we have that here in the United States, and I've seen even my interaction with our government here. We have an organization in the government known as the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and I've met with them, very well-intentioned people. I think these are people that really care. They really, really do. I think they care about what's going on. But the folks that I've dealt with in the organization who are responsible for drug policy here in the United States, what's interesting to note of them is none of them are in recovery. And they can be as well as intentioned as they want to be. But, that was one of Bill Wilson's big discoveries. Bill Wilson, being one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, his big discovery to mankind was what works is, in his case, one alcoholic working with another alcoholic, because only an alcoholic can understand an alcoholic. And I think that that's true, across the board with drugs, that when you're making these policies, if you want the policies to work, then you're going to have to talk to the people like you, like me, that have lived this, have gone through it. And, if I want to know how to get sober from heroin, Sharon Webster is probably a good person to talk to, because, Sharon Webster's been there, right? Mike has been there. And, it's funny that if I need some electrical work done in my house, I'm not talking to my dentist about that. If I need my stove fixed in my kitchen, I'm not talking to a lawyer about that. I'm talking to somebody that has experience in that area, and we don't do enough of that. And we wonder why we have these problems. And I really, I know here in America, there's a real big push for drugs that's become, because of the opiate crisis. We have a real opiate crisis over here. But I can tell you this, that the government's not bringing people like me and you in to formulate policy, which is what they should do. And so if you are anybody in the current administration here in the United States, if you're listening to my voice right now, bring people like us in to help you formulate policy. In UK, if you're listening to this right now, you should talk to Sharon and one of her colleagues about what you should do, because that's where you're going to get your answers from, to get the help, because that's where it comes from. But furthermore, and I think that you're the same way in this regard. I know this. I don't depend on my recovery. I don't depend on my government to get me sober, right?
No.
At the end of the day, the person that was responsible for me getting sober was me at the end of the day. And I wasn't going to get sober until I wanted to get sober. So, and you've talked about that a little bit on some of the YouTube videos I've seen, Sharon. So could you maybe address that a little bit? What has been your experience with, the motivation, what kind of motivation is there right now in Scotland? And if that motivation's not there, how do we get there? How do we get people sober?
So to understand, because our systems are very different in the States and in Scotland, the UK as a whole, we have a system for financial support, housing support, NHS. So a lot of people's power has been taken away, especially people who are unemployed or on a low income, things like that. So when you're suffering from addiction, you have to go outside yourself to get support, it's been told. And yes, you do probably need that kind of support at the start to get stable, to get yourself in a good thinking so that you can move forward. But essentially, people's power is taken away, like their own power is taken away, and they always look outside themselves for the resolution to their addiction or to get help. And because the people that are offering the support don't understand that they have to take control of that situation themselves before they will get better. Yeah, they kind of take away your power. And we've got a few colleagues that work in the NHS, and we work quite closely with them, and they're in agreement with a lot of things we say, and they're taking on board a lot of what we say. So things are changing that way, and people are now starting to get control of their treatment, how it works and stuff like that. But essentially here, I think that people's power has been taken away for so long, and they live in the circumstances that mean that they're always looking for support for even the living and being a human being. So when it comes to recovery and addiction, they still look outside themselves, and I think that is a huge problem, and they're waiting for somebody else to give them the answers and waiting for somebody else to say you're going to get better or this is how to get better, not realizing the only person that can do that is themselves. And for me, it wasn't until I went to my key worker and I said, I want to come off methadone. I was on 25 milligrams of methadone and was on that for about 3 years, a very, very low dose compared to the optimal dose, which is probably about 50 or 60 milligrams. But he told me back then it would take me a year to come off this medication. And to me, I didn't have a year. Like, I needed to be off it now, and I knew that I could do it. It took me 2 weeks to do it. And he had me go back and forth to see him for 6 months, saying I was at high risk of overdose, so using again. And I said to him, well, that's not going to happen because I want to get better, and I feel like I've took control of what's going on, and I feel okay. But for a lot of people, they're not able to, and because they've been dependent on these social services, NHS, and that for such a long time, and these people have been involved with families for generations, the thought of taking control of your own life is terrifying for anybody that's living in a housing scheme in Scotland. And yeah, it's quite scary. And then you've also got the added issue of a lot of these people have been using alcohol and drugs since they were teenagers, adolescents. I was very lucky I had a point of reference. My addiction didn't take hold until I was 27. These people have been taking drugs since they were children, so they've never lived as adults. So the fear of that as well. You've got loads of people walking about in adult bodies, but actually they're adolescents' mind, and they don't know how to live as adults. So it's complex, and it's actually worrying because we've now got 3 generations of people that are in them circumstances, and there's only very few people that I know in the city that I live in that have succeeded in the recovery and maintained it because of these reasons.
Yeah, and that's a very, very good point. I heard that said to me once, and it's funny, Sharon, that we've never met, and you're on the other side of the ocean from me. But yet we're speaking the same language. We really are.
Yeah.
Albeit your language is a really cool sounding Scottish language and mine's not.
Oh,
but it's it's the same language, because I heard a long time ago in early recovery that when you get and see if I can get it put right, that once you get sober, you are at the age that you were when you started in your addiction. So if you were 15 years old when you started in your addiction and you got sober when you were 40, you're actually a 40-year-old man or a woman walking around in a 15-year-old body. I've heard that before, and there's a lot of truth to that. And the shame of what you're saying to me, and this is something that I really think needs to change the mentality, is and here you are, people having people from the government telling you, hey, look, if you go off of this drug, you're just going to relapse and you're going to go back to using your own drug, which is not the message that needs to be sent. And I actually did a previous podcast on this subject, and that is this whole idea of harm reduction, right? That we don't eliminate the use. In harm reduction, you reduce the use, so it's not harming you as bad. That's kind of like the whole idea. When in reality, sobriety is about, at the end of the day, complete and total abstinence, meaning that if I'm on heroin, I don't want to be on methadone the rest of my life. If I'm on alcohol, I don't want to maintain a certain level of alcohol. I want to eliminate it out of my life. And that has to be the goal. Because, I think the opposite, Sharon, is true of what the NHS was telling you. Using methadone, even in small doses, actually, I believe, would increase your chances from relapsing because you still have that in your system. I know with me, with alcohol, getting alcohol out of my system and keeping it out of my system for years, for a very long period of time, has decreased my cravings and has made my life 1,000%, not 100% better, 1,000% better. And I know that if I use alcohol, then the craving will come back and it will cause me to relapse again. So it's interesting, once again, here you have people that really don't understand what they're talking about, giving you advice on what you should be doing. And it's funny. And the amazing thing about it is you intuitively knew, no, the answer is I need to stop taking this. And you're having to tell the healthcare professional, no, I need to stop this. But they didn't seem to understand that, did they?
No, definitely not. For me, for personally, and I'm not speaking for anybody else when I say this, for me personally, looking back on the treatment and how I've got to the point that I've had, looking back, treating somebody that's got a heroin addiction with an opiate blows my mind. I say to people, and it's probably, a lot of people might not agree with me, if somebody came to me and says they have an issue with alcohol, I wouldn't give them more alcohol to stop drinking alcohol. So so it makes no sense to me. And I think that there has to be better ways of helping people, and I understand socially and how poverty works, so I understand why these interventions are used, the drugs are used, and I know that it probably won't change for quite some time until people realise that fundamentally it's only them that's going to get themselves better. But it's that a lot of people in the NHS, I'm not saying that they always go out. If you want to work in the health service or help get people better, you're doing it from a place of good. You're not going out and getting up every day and saying, well, I'm going to make this person's life worse by giving them this or not giving them the support they need. But I think that it's very short-sighted right now, and I think that I don't know, it's hard to explain into words. I really think that, like you said, lived experience and people that know addiction because they're in recovery are the best people to support people. And these people don't have that knowledge. There's a total disconnect there as well. So on every level, I'm seeing disconnects on treatment, on policies, on government. It filters right down to the basics. So it's and it's only people like us that will be able to bring this message forward, let people understand their own power, their ability to get better, and that it is possible to get better. Because I think for a long time in my city, most people that suffered from addiction, especially drug addiction, alcohol has always been an issue in Dundee, like a huge issue, but drug addiction, people were written off, totally written off. There wasn't any pushed to get these people off the treatment they were, so they were on a community-based treatment plan, going to a pharmacy every day, picking up medication. Then you've got people there that are just newly into treatment who are still using drugs. So the risk of harm for somebody that's on a treatment that's community-based is a daily thing. And it's one of the reasons that I came off methadone, because my life had moved on so far and I was doing so much work in the community, but I was still being subjected to people that were still using drugs, which triggered me on a daily basis. And it's very hard to move away from that because there is no other option. That's the way it works. It's it's like running around on a hamster wheel, Mike. That's
Oh, it
that's
is.
what it's
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah. No, I
But,
absolutely
yeah.
can relate to that. And you talk about the causes in the conditions, right? So the cause and condition.
Mm-hmm.
So the condition is the physiological addiction that we have to the substance, right? And there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
genetic predisposition
Mm-hmm.
to show that that's there. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of research that's out there that shows that people of Northern European descent have a higher predisposition towards addiction. There's just a lot of research that's out there on it. So that's why I keep preaching the science side of this, because that helped me
Mm-hmm.
when I understood that my body was genetically wired to predispose me towards addiction. That helped me understand that this wasn't just me being a bad person, being a weak person, because I wasn't. I mean, my willpower, and Sharon, from what I've seen in you, your willpower is enormous, but it's not about willpower.
Mm-hmm.
Your body is wired to be predisposed towards addiction. And when you know that, when you know that and you understand that, you can take measures that will help you in your recovery. Like, for example, I have allergies, right? When things in the spring here start to bloom, the flowers and the grass and everything starts to grow, I have a severe a reaction to that. I start sneezing and coughing, and I have to take medications to control that. Right now, imagine if somebody were to come up to me and say, "Hey, Mike, you know what? You know when you sneeze and you cough like that in the spring, I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. You're not a good father. If you were a better father, that wouldn't happen. If you went to church more often, that wouldn't happen. If you were a better employee, if you loved your wife more, that wouldn't happen to you, right?" And I would look at you and say, "What? Are you crazy? What does that have to do with me sneezing due to these allergies that I have?" Well, if you think about it, that's exactly what we do in recovery. We say, you're having this reaction to these drugs. You're hooked on this drug. You know what your problem is? You don't love your wife enough. You're not a good employee. You're not a good father. You don't do this. You don't do that. You don't work out enough. And you're thinking, anybody that's had an addiction knows that has nothing to do with it. Of course I love my wife. Of course I love my children. I try to be a good employee. All these different things. And there was always a disconnect. It was like, I do those things. I still go to church, but you're telling me that I don't do enough of that, and now I'm drinking. And it's because one has nothing to do with the other. It is, I don't tell somebody that has an allergy to peanuts or an allergy to shellfish that they need to work out more. No, what you do is you say, your body is wired that when this stuff starts to grow over here, when things start to bloom, your body genetically is wired to have an adverse reaction to that. Well, the same is that we have to alcohol and drugs. My body has a different reaction than most people has. And so what's the solution to that? Is to not use that substance. If I was allergic to peanuts, I just would not eat peanuts. If I have diabetes, there's certain things that I have to do. If I have cancer, there's certain things I have to do. And the funny thing is, we don't question that. If the doctor tells me not to do something because I'll have a reaction, I don't question it. But for some reason, when we get into addiction, when we give people the solution, they say, yeah, not so much. We have a better answer. Maybe this will work. And that may be the problem, because that's the condition. That's the body's reaction. But then the cause, meaning, but why do we try to do these things do we do these things that are destructive to us? We do that because of the unhappiness, whether it's unemployment. You talk about the severe poverty and just the conditions, and that just puts people in depression. It puts people in a point where they don't have hope, and that wanting to escape. At the end of the day, addiction is about escapism and isolation, and wanting to get away, remove yourself from the situation that you're in. And that's what has to be addressed, is to give people hope that there is a better way, that you're not going to have hope. You're not going to succeed if you engage in drug addiction or alcoholism, or a combination of both. A lot of people actually have both drugs, because you're just going to destroy yourself. You will never escape from where you are by doing this. And really the better way is to not use these drugs. And maybe that message just isn't out there enough, that, hey, you don't have to be a third generation addict. there is a better way. You can break that cycle. Do you agree with that, Sharon?
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, like I said earlier on, our focus is now turned to the young people who are affected, like you say, generationally. Like you're talking, we said 3 generations. In fact, we're going into 4 generations now, and these young people know they don't know any different. They're already conditioned, like you say, because of their makeup and who they are, and primed to be an addict. And then you've got the social and the their peers and the added pressure of that. But they know no different. Like, this is how they've lived. They've got uncles, grandparents, everybody. They've been drug users, drug sellers, criminals, and there is no hope in communities like mine. And this is, I think, the whole reason of why we've changed what we're doing, because we need to now address that issue and show young people, like, you can be a single mother of 4 children whose partner committed suicide with no money and get off your arse. Sorry, excuse me for saying that word, but getting off your bum and getting up, and you can make things change. People are resided to the fact, even without the added pressure of addiction and that, socially, that one person can't change anything, and that they're resided to how things are right now is how they're always going to be, because you can't change it. You can't do anything to change it. And obviously that's where the activism comes in. But the hope aspect of when you're living in an area where unemployment is high, drug addiction, mental health, suicide, teenage pregnancy, all these added things outside what you're already experienced personally, there is no hope. And we have to be able to show people that there is hope, and the only way you can do that is make yourself visible, like the things you're doing with the work and the stuff that you've done with the agency and stuff, like our activism. And the only way we can do that is make ourselves visible on social media, through being in our community, talking to people and showing young people especially that there is hope. Like, you don't have to resign yourself to the fact that this is going to be your life and this is how it's going to turn out. You don't have to be the 5th generation in your family who suffers from addiction. Like, you can address these issues. You can go back to the fundamentals in your family and break the cycle. And I think that the hope of breaking the cycle that these people are in just now, especially where I live, the hope is gone. The hope is gone, and people don't really believe there is any hope. That like, say that your grandfather was, I don't know, a mechanic, then your dad was a mechanic, and your uncle was a mechanic, and you're a young man in that family, so you'd be a mechanic. That's the job you'd probably take. But it's the same with addiction. I think people see their grandparents, their mothers, and it's a way of life now. It's the hope is gone. And yeah, I don't know. I think that for me, essentially, and I worry most about my children. I can see the effects that my addiction had on them personally, and I know that they are not unique. They are just part of a bigger picture, and it scares me that 2 or 3 more generations will grow up thinking that there is no hope, that this is all that you can do. Like, young men in our community are conditioned to think that it is a way of life to sell drugs and a way of making money, and that is what happens. Young women are exploited sexually because of the drug and crime, and that's what happens, and people have accepted it. We've got parents that are accepting the fact that what they're doing, they're allowing their kids to do. There's no integrity, morality, everything's gone, and the hope is not there. Like you say, there is no hope just now. And it's rather scary for me to think that this can continue and the cycle won't be broken because of the conditions that people are putting up with, and the fact that their power is sort of taken away. Like, essentially through education and lack of education and lack of intervention. Like, we know that the people that we support have suffered immense trauma as children. The services that are available have been connected to these families for a very long time, and they've had the ability to intervene in the right way. And because that's not happened, they're now going to be young people and young adults that are not going to be productive. They're not going to contribute to the community in a positive way, and they're going to end up either in prison, dead, or I don't know. It's quite scary, I suppose, because we're grassroots. We see these things firsthand, and it's probably hard for somebody that doesn't experience that to understand the implications for that. But it means that a whole community is broken, and there is no community, and people are just trying to survive on the basics. That's it. They're not even living. They're just existing, and it scares me, actually.
Yeah, they're not living. I love that line right there. They're not living. They're just existing. And you know, Sharon, and I tell you what, we'll kind of wrap up for today on that note. And because I hope that you can come join us again to continue the conversation. Can you do that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, because I really think that your message is very, very powerful, and it's something that needs to get out to the community. It's very important, and people like yourself are the folks that people can look to see that hope. We call it, they call it the experience, strength, and hope. And there's no better example for the community than to see someone that came from that and are now living a successful life and showing that you can be a contributing member of society. And really the big secret to recovery is passing the message along to other people and helping the next person, doing that next right thing, as they say. And that's exactly what you are doing. And let me wrap up with this, because one of the reasons why I do what I do, and I know you do what you do, Sharon, is this, that I had been trained early on to believe that my recovery needed to be a secret, that, we don't talk about recovery outside of recovery circles. And it wasn't until I came across a documentary, actually. It's and I'll do a little plug for it. It's called Anonymous People. It's a video that was put out by a group called Faces and Voices of Recovery. It's called Anonymous People. Mm-hmm. And the premise, have you seen that, Sharon? Anonymous People?
I've not seen Anonymous People, but we're involved with Faces and Voices of Recovery in Dundee. Like there's the charity exists here as well, and we have done work at Scottish Parliament with them, and we created the drug-related death page and helped them bring awareness to that. So I know who they are, and I know the CEO very well. So
it's a very good group. And I saw one of and it was a weird thing. And the weird thing about it was I was teaching a course on addiction, but I had been trained to not talk about my own. And I had some people in the class call me out because they were saying, "Hey, look, you're in recovery, aren't you?" And I told them yes. This was in private. They pulled me aside, and they said, "Well, the problem here is you're talking about this, and it's obvious to us that you're passionate about this. You didn't just read about this. You're in it, but you're not being honest with us about it." And it wasn't that I was trying to lie to these people. I actually believed that I was doing what I was told to do. And I had that day, I was driving home, and I talked to some people in the program that were in recovery, and they said, "Well, Mike, we don't talk about recovery outside of recovery circles. And, too bad, but we just don't do that." And then I went home and I talked to my wife about it, and she understands recovery, and she didn't have any answers. I mean, we had a long discussion about it. And that night, and the weird thing about this is, and this is why I don't really believe in coincidences anymore. That night I was getting ready to go to bed, and I'm flipping through the television, and there's, hundreds of channels, but there's nothing on television worthwhile. And I just for one split second stopped on a channel, and something caught my eye, and it was this documentary called Anonymous People. And I ended up watching it. And the sort of the theme of the documentary was that people, first of all, addiction destroys communities, and it's the number one killer. I don't care what people say about all of these other diseases, all these other things going on. Take even COVID, for example. Right now, people are talking about the death rate. The fact is, more people will die from addiction this year than will die from COVID. But yet we don't shut down the whole country as a result of it. But anyway, they said that this is a real problem, but the problem that we face is that the people that got well are trained to not talk about it. And how do people expect to get well, and how do we expect to change the stigma unless people that are well known, people that are respected in the community, people that, because those people are out there. It's not just poverty. It's not just the homeless. It's not what we think stereotypically that it is. The fact is, everybody suffers from addiction. I don't care how wealthy you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your sexual preference is. It doesn't matter. Everybody is affected by addiction. But their premise was, if nobody talks about it, then how do people know to get well? And they said, we need an army of people to get out and preach that word. And so my wife looked at me and she goes, well, there's your answer right there. And so the next day I went in and that was the very first time outside of recovery circles that I told my story. And I've been doing it ever since. But that's what you're doing, Sharon, is you're getting that message out and giving the people of Scotland the example, setting that example to lead the way on, you can get better. If I can do it, you can do it. But here's how I did it. And so with that, Sharon, I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much for being here.
No, I appreciate it. No, it's been a great experience. Thank you for letting me speak to you, and hopefully we can speak again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. And as I always like to say, I don't represent any group. I don't represent anyone other than myself. And my only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what I've done, because it has helped me and maybe it will help you too. If I or Sharon have said something that doesn't apply to you or you don't agree with, then just discard it. But try to take any information that you can use for yourself and help others as well. That's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and we hope to impart that knowledge we have gained so others can benefit as well. And so with that, visit our Facebook page, Recovery is Possible, and our website, VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com, and let me know how I'm doing, and let me know if there's a topic that you're interested in hearing, and I'd love to hear from you. And take care, and we will see you next time.